I'm going to give everyone a koan this morning. Good morning,
Morning.
Robert. And ask you all to, regardless of what your practice, going to sit with this koan this morning. Regardless of whether or not you've passed this koan, you're going to sit with this koan this morning and hold it. Really hold it with freshness. Even if if you've known it before, you sat with it before, and I told you you just gave the most brilliant answer anybody had ever gave on a koan. Beginner's mind this morning. Start all over, fresh. And then I'm going to briefly and quickly ask you, anyone who's got a burning desire, to give a non-verbal response to the koan. Okay, hear that word, all you verbal people, non-verbal response. And then I'm going to give a talk on this koan, or around this koan. Okay, that is clear. Okay, good. So this koan is from the Muman, the Gateless Gate collection. And it's number 37, the oak tree in the garden. A monk asked Joshu in all earnestness, what is the meaning of the patriot coming from the west? Joshu said, the oak tree there in the garden. I'll repeat that. A monk asked Joshu in all earnestness, what is the meaning of the patriarchs coming from the west? Joshu said, the oak tree there in the garden. Okay, Susan, start us off, please. And I'll repeat it once more after we chant. Go ahead. All right. All right.
All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, because of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and consciousness. Now I atone for it all. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, because of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and consciousness. Now I atone for it all. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, because of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and consciousness. Now I atone for it all.
Okay, so one other comment about this, and then I'll read them again. I know some of you have not done any koan work, and that's okay. Do the best you can. The goal here is intimacy. The goal here is getting really close to the koan. And we could, but I, years ago when Stefan first came to Oakland, the Waterville area, Peter Harris arranged an invitation for them to go to Colby College and to speak to the students. Steph and Margaret were my teachers. They were the founders of Treetop. And so they came, and there were probably 50 students, I'd say, that came to their talk. Because Peter Harris was kind of responsible for putting the event together, I think they were heavily favoring students who were in English poetry programs, that kind of thing. But anyway, but the interesting thing is that they all sat with this koan, same way that you're going to do it now. And then we asked for some response after they got to be verbal. You don't get to be verbal. I'm not that nice. But I would say that probably 50%, these were people that were completely naive to koan practice. 50% of them probably would have passed the koan with the answers they gave. They gave such wonderful answers. So that's beginner's mind right there. That's what Suzuki Roshi's talking about. They didn't bring a lot of baggage and bam, they just nailed it. So have fun. Have fun. I'll read it again one more time. A monk asked Joshu in all earnestness, "What is the meaning of the patriarchs coming from the West?" Joshu said, "The oak tree there in the garden." Screen share right now? Yes, okay.
Yes.
Yes,
A
so I picture
beautiful
this is
sprawling tree.
it's a 1,400-year oak tree that is in South. So oak trees have the capacity to grow to that kind of age. They almost never do because we cut them down. Right? But this tree, look, it's just an amazing being, isn't it? It's an amazing being. Okay, so I'm going to take it down. Get rid of my screen share. And so who would like to present their understanding of this koan? Okay, can everyone see what Vera? Yes, okay, good. Go on to the next koan, Vera Ellen. Oh,
I'll go.
somebody else want to present?
I do.
Okay. Okay, and you can go next koan. Thank you. All right, so lot to say about this. This is a wonderful. It has endless depth. We could work with this koan for our entire lives and never reach the bottom. I don't say that about every koan. There's some I say like, okay, you got the essential point, move on. But it has so much depth, so much richness to it, and it's yet so simple, right? A couple of simple sentences. And object, the oak tree. Personally, I just love oak trees when part because they have such a beautiful form when the leaves are off in the winter. When I drive around, we're often struck by just the amazing form of some of the oaks that are around, and the twisting of the branches and so on. That and black locusts are, as far as I'm concerned, two of the species of trees that are most fascinating without their foliage, most beautiful. So this koan is about intimacy, right? It's about connecting with and experiencing the oak tree. Intimacy, non-separation. Truly directly encountering and directly knowing the thing that's in front of our eyes, which we seldom do. And there is the oak tree. And what is the oak tree doing? Well, as your responses pointed out, it is just being an oak tree. It is carrying out all of the essential features of oak tree-ness. It changes with the seasons. It adapts with storms. In the summer, it does photosynthesis. In the winter, it rests dormant. All the things that a tree does. That's oak tree nature. If we had a thing that we were talking about called oak tree nature, it would be just that, just this, just be. And in the fullness of what it is. But what this koan also does is kind of turns us back on ourselves and says, what is our nature? In what way do we resemble or not resemble the wonderful oak tree? How do we as humans express ourselves as fully and as simply and as profoundly as that tree can do? And the simple answer is, it's difficult. We make it complicated. We like to think, we like to analyze. We ask these questions. Why am I here? What is the meaning of life? The oak tree never asks, what is the meaning of life? The oak tree doesn't have to ask what is the meaning of life. And we make ourselves sad, or we make angry, or we make ourselves depressed as we think about all of these things. And we analyze, we make life enormously complex. And the oak tree doesn't have to do that, doesn't do that. So the question is that this is what Joshu is really posing to us. How do we be like that oak tree? And yet, how do we be humans? So just as the oak tree is expressing its essential nature as oak tree, we need to express our essential nature as human beings. We can't be oak trees. It'd freeze out there, for one thing. But it's not about us having oak tree nature. It's having essential human nature. And what is that? That mean we should never think? We should never have an opinion? We should never have a like, dislike? We should never have a relationship? No, all of those things and many, many, many more are part of the essential human nature that we have. So what's different? The way in which our nature needs to resemble the oak tree's nature is that we need fully engaged in our lives. Not halfway, not lukewarm, not taking baby steps, fully engaged in our lives. The oak tree is fully engaged in everything that it does. When it puts out its leaves, when the leaves fall, when it blows in the wind, it doesn't separate, it doesn't hold back, it doesn't analyze, it doesn't ponderate, it does. And we have that same capacity to live our lives in that way, to live our lives fully committed to every moment of our being. Now, this is also an intimacy koan. We are that oak tree. We are not separate from that oak tree. We are not separate from all of reality, even though we believe ourselves to be. And therefore, our fate and of everything else is intimately interconnected. What happens to the oak tree happens to me. What happens to me happens to the oak tree. So, in a sense, this is a very eco-dharma koan. It's reminding of that at the level of essential nature, we are all one. This is all one body. We are connected. And because of that, we have a responsibility to this one body, to all life, to all beings. So I want to tie this to something else that I've been giving some consideration to, somewhat related, is the Buddha's teaching of the middle way. Now, you may recall, if you know the story of Shakyamuni Buddha, that he was born as and grew up as Prince Gautama, this very wealthy prince in an Indian state. And his father shielded him from any of suffering, old age, death, thinking that that would keep him from wanting to be a holy man, a spiritual person. And it backfired because he did encounter those things, so upset, kind of so moved by seeing sickness, old age, and he went off into the forest to be a monk, to be a ascetic monk. And the ascetic monks did some very severe practices, prolonged fasting and sleep deprivation and kind of sitting out in any weather, kind of, and the upshot was that Shakyamuni, the Buddha, almost died. And fortunately, a young woman in a village happened to come across him near death. And she had goats, so she got goat milk. And she came every day and fed him some goat milk and helped him restore his strength. And out of that experience, it said that he had this realization of the middle way, not the extreme aesthetic practices that many of the yogis in India were involved in at that time. And yet also practice that was deep, however we want to put it. So the middle way between extreme practice and half-hearted, insincere practice. So many of us, I often get the question, particularly as people are, how long should I practice? How much should I practice? How should I do this? And I usually give some kind of a vague answer. You know, there's a broad range of how people in the Zen world interpret the middle way. There are places in Japan where the monks sit for 19 hours a day. And they are practicing the middle way. During retreats that do that, not necessarily all the time, but and in this country, certainly where the retreats are far more challenging than they are at Treetop, which brings the shameless commercial announcement that there is a retreat this coming week. And it will all be virtual. And you can go on the Treetop website and learn the schedule. And I hope that you'll choose to join it for at least part of the time as your schedules. But that's back to this question. What is the right amount of this? How much should I sit? How much should I chant? How much, whatever it is. And that answer should be different for each and every one of you. Because each and every one of you has a different life, different commitments, different responsibilities, different interests. And what you can reasonably devote this is entirely your responsibility to determine. And I encourage you to do it without guilt and shame. What I'm trying to say here is that to that koan, there is no right answer. There's the answer that you find, that you feel in your heart, that you're doing your practice well, you're offering it the time that you can, and you're blending it with your life. And then most importantly, that you're carrying it out in your life. Whether you sit on a cushion 5 minutes a day or 5 hours a day, it still leaves a whole lot of day. And that entire day is an opportunity to practice. Back to the oak tree. The oak tree, practicing being an oak tree every minute of the day. It doesn't say, okay, I'm going to sit down for half an hour, be an oak tree. And so we too have that opportunity to practice being a human being every hour of the day, to express our nature. And how do we do that? By engaging, by living. Now, this brings up every Zen student's favorite friend, thinking. And one of the most responses I hear from people who've just started sitting or, is I still have all these thoughts. said, and I say this, I can't say this enough, because hear this come up time and again. The goal practice is not getting rid of thoughts. That's the goal of heroin use. Our nature as human beings to think. Frankly, it's both what got us where we are and messed us up the way we are because of how we do that. So thinking it's necessary sometimes, right? You wake up in the morning, am I going to have cereal or am I going to have eggs? Or am I even going to not get out of this bed? We've got to think, we've got to make some decisions. Oh, yeah, right. I'm a little low on cereal, but I just bought eggs. Oh, right? We didn't do that. We couldn't even begin our days. We have to think. And that's not antithetical to our human nature. That's part of our human nature. Now, I always have that. Yes. There are some states of samadhi. I think Rhode Island and Nebraska that don't involve thinking, but all the other states you think. Okay. And it's okay. So what are we trying to do? We're trying not to attach to those thoughts. We're trying not to make dramas, narratives. We're trying to live and engage and do what's necessary. And in that process, allow our natural compassion to come through. Ultimately, that's what our lives are about. That's our oak tree nature. Express compassion is to help other beings, is to help the oak trees. The oak trees can't save themselves from our destruction. We have to save them from destruction. And to do that, we have to think. We have to think and we have to act. That's part of being human. Okay, I'm going to pause there for questions anybody has or comments.
Peter, I had a question when you were talking about the middle way. My mind immediately went to intense retreats and why we do them. And I then heard you say that at Treetop, our retreats are the middle way, which I understand. But I've also found them to be pretty extreme and not always in the middle. So how does that fit with the concept of finding the middle way?
Well, okay, thank you. Well, that's, I guess part of my point was that the middle way narrow is a lot of room in how it's defined and seen. Okay, at the first place that I practiced, where I practiced for about 10 years, we started sitting at 2 o'clock in the morning and we stopped our sitting day at 10 o'clock in the evening. And every minute in between, we ate our meals in the zendo, sitting zazen posture, cross-legged posture. So our legs never caught a break from the fact we had just done an hour and a half of zazen. We then spent time, we had to sit on the cushions in zazen posture and so on and so forth. This is why I say the treetop retreats are, everything is relative. As I said, there are places in Japan, they do 19 hours of zazen during retreats. So it's all relative. So what I'm trying to say is that the middle way is a concept, not a target. And it's going to be different for every, now that said, what is the point of retreats? Why should we ever? That's a really legitimate question. I think the simple answer is that in retreats, we focus more, and consequently we have less sort of extraneous things drawing on our attention, and it allows us to deeper and more intimate with our practice. And if you've done multi-day retreats, have probably found that as the days come with all our crap, all our resistance, all our hopes, fears, etc. And as we go through the days of sitting, those eventually fall away, and I always start a retreat uncomfortable and end the retreat saying, oh, I wish this went on a couple of more days. Because something has happened in that process. There's been a shift. We've let go of so much stuff. And when we let go of that stuff, we're able to go deeper in our practice. So, but again, even within how that plays out, this retreat, as you know, that's coming up, for example, is virtual. And you can participate in as much or as little as you want. That's always the rule at Treetop, as much or as little as you want. So then we understand people have families, people have jobs, people have responsibility, and it's often harder or impossible to just drop in for a bunch of days, And so we always encourage people, come when you can, sit. And there's really not a lot of sitting through the day. I haven't seen the schedule for this retreat yet, but historically, there's been some healthy breaks in there. But again, it's just like the daily practice. Do what you can, do what you want. The only one who's going to kind of check you on. Just by virtue of the fact that you are here, you care. You care about how you live your life. You care about things like compassion. You care about the prospect of realizing your true nature, your essential nature. So just by fact that you're here, you're on the right track. The rest, as they say, is commentary. Even if you could come for the talks in the evenings, if you work another matter, just that is worthwhile. Not so much the night that I'm talking, but Todd is going to give a talk. I think Jim know. Oh, coming to here. For those who can't see, I have my mala in my hand. So communicating with Jim Noack. Those of you who don't know Jim, he is the resident teacher at Tree, and he went to New York to be with family for the holidays, and he has COVID. And has some other medical conditions. So I think he's okay. He's vaccinated and boosted, and he basically said, "I'm vaccinated and I'm boosted, and you absolutely do not want to get this." So Jim is there, and I may have mentioned this before. If I haven't. Julie Rose, who is a member of this, and some of you know Julie just lost her husband a couple of months ago. Al passed very quickly from cancer. Julie has COVID. So the truth of that, I'd like to close today with the Tara mantra, and I'll explain what that's all about for them and for all people who are suffering from COVID. Yeah, and hold Jim and Julie in our hearts. This Omicron is something else, because these are not people who took root. These are not people who went around maskless. These are not people who hung out in groups. So it's all this has nothing to do with the Dharma. This is just the cautionary note to us all. I hear more and more experts saying that we're all going to get this. It's so contagious. But regardless, I hope I don't want to be that fatalistic, but I want it's just it to us all to be really, really careful and take care of ourselves. Okay, so we're going to do Tara mantra, which we haven't done in a while. And I'll explain what it is. This is a Tibetan practice. It's a mantra. And it is to invoke compassion in the world. Green Tara is, let's say, the archetype, the symbol of the feminine aspect of compassion in the universe. And the idea is that when we say this mantra, we bring forth that energy, that compassion energy in ourselves and in the world around us. And not separate, right? No, not separate. In ourselves and in the world around us. And it's a very simple mantra. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. And we will repeat it, we will chant it and repeat it 108 times. Hence the, which has 108 beads. Okay. And so we'll chant together. And if you don't know the words, just long until you know the words. By the 76th repetition, you'll all have it. Susan, would you give us one bell, please? Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare 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 Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. 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 Om Tare Tutare Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi 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 Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tuturi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare 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 Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi 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 Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Turi. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. 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 So the final thing that I would like to see, since the subject of COVID has come up and you know, all this, there's so much suffering in the world right now. And that suffering can make us want to look away, to turn our eyes, and we think that that will make us feel better. That will feel less despair, less hopeless, less fear. And what we know from Zen is that's the exact opposite. When suffering occurs before our eyes, we need to turn into it. And we need to use our compassion to be of service to others. Compassionate service is the cure for despair. Compassionate service is the cure for fear. Compassionate service, opening our hearts, engaging, not running away.